Do you know there are some TV shows that just kind of kept going? It's it's a weird. It's not exactly a weird thing because commercialization and making sure that you get as much studio wise, network wise, get as much profit as you can out of a show. That's pretty cool. But then we're also in the era of shows are getting cancelled after 1 to 2 seasons. They're not getting enough time to breathe or live, and these are shows that are really critically well regarded. Fans are loving it, or at least people are becoming big fans of it, and then okay, I'm mostly talking about Netflix. Most of their shows are getting cancelled, and the ones that nobody likes are still going. But I think that's one of those, nobody likes them, but they're incredibly hate watched, and the people who do like them maybe don't realize why it might be bad. I don't know. I'm considering, in my mind, Emily in Paris. I've never seen it, but my parents watched it recently. They liked it, so I'm like, all right, I don't care. Like, I pointed out, like, some people find the show to be apparently a bit racist, and it's like, I think it is towards French people and Americans, but I think there's meant to be like a tongue-in-cheek satire about it as well, which seems pretty obvious to some degree, and I don't know, I don't give a shit. I don't watch Netflix originals anymore, so, you know. So, there are some other shows that have continued. One of my favourite examples is Scrubs, because that was one where they had the perfect 8-season run. It ends with the main character leaving, and then they just kept going. But it didn't just keep going. They made another season, which they then subtitled it like Med School or whatever, to try and make it seem like a spin-off, but it really was just season 9. And it had like 3 characters return from the main series, including, after like 3 episodes, the main character comes back. And he's just there? Like, teaching them or some shit? I don't know. I only watched like a few episodes and I was like, why is Dave Franco in Scrubs? And then I just stopped watching it because it wasn't really good. So that was one of those classic examples of they want to continue the brand going, but they can't afford to have the main cast from the previous 9 seasons stick around. Or the previous 8 seasons stick around. So instead they just get a few of them to come back for some cameo roles here and there and try to focus on a new group of people, a new group of doctors. And nobody really liked it. Nobody really wanted it, at least what we were getting. And it just didn't take off after that. They just didn't. They didn't continue with it. It's stayed with that 9th season and just ended there. So a lot of those faces are people you'd be like, oh, that's Dave Franco. I'm pretty sure the chick who plays like Superwoman or Supergirl was in there as well. I don't know, there's a lot of those casts where you'd be like, hey, they're now in this other much bigger show, or they're famous actors from Hollywood movies or whatever. But it's like, yeah, well, everyone gets their start on something that tanks. It happens. One of my favourite shows that I haven't watched for a while, because I think it's on Stan in Australia. I don't have Stan anymore. Not a great streaming service. Not the worst, but not the best. But they had a show called, which wasn't a Stan original, it was like an American, maybe Paramount show, I don't know, called Angie Tribeca. Angie Tribeca is basically, well, if you've heard of the Naked Gun films, which was spawned from the Police Squad show, which I would highly recommend you watching the show if you haven't. It's a hell of a lot better than the movies, but the movies are still really good for what they are. Like, there's a lot of jokes in them that don't age well, but for the most part, the regular practical comedy or just Leslie Nielsen being a douche is great. There's this other stuff in those movies that aren't fantastic, but for the most part, they're pretty good. The TV show, on the other hand, is one of the best shows I've seen in terms of both a procedural drama and also has a lot of slapstick comedy and just a lot of comedy in general. Like, I think I've made a video talking about it before, especially for how... I think I did, actually, didn't I? How Police Squad does comedy. I did a video essay talking about Police Squad from 2 years ago. It got 230 views. That kind of sucks, but hey, for 12 minutes, I mean, 230 views is fine, I guess. I don't know. We're looking at my channel here. I don't get a lot of views anyway. Well, that was like 2 years ago especially, so for back then, not so bad. But I apparently analysed how they did comedy in their show, which I don't think is really a thing you want to do anymore, analysing comedy. But their style of comedy was replicated in Angie Tribeca to the point that they even credited it as like one of their main sources of inspiration. Not actually the Naked Gun films, but the TV show, because they basically just remade the TV show, but with different actors, including Rashida Jones? I think that's how to pronounce her name. Really goddamn good cast. If you like Alfred Molina, Dr. Octopus, he's fantastic in the show. It's a show I gotta rewatch. I gotta also need to seek out to see if they have a Blu-ray release or something, or just a DVD release, because it's such a funny show. I haven't seen it for ages, but they had like 3 solid seasons, and that's pretty good for a show that doesn't really have much to do in terms of like overall narrative arcs. Like the last episode might have like a main villain, but for the most part it's kind of just for a gag. You know how like She-Hulk tried doing that, and I liked She-Hulk, but like it didn't. It was kind of weird about it because it was overly meta. They went for that approach here. This show just like, oh, what if like Chris Pine is like an arch nemesis who just shows up, and like he doesn't really do much, but that's like also kind of the joke. They just have him there like in a Hannibal Lecter-esque kind of like, just there. It's great. It's fun. They got a great like a lot of like good cameos as well. A lot of great jokes. But their 4th season, which I have never seen, apparently wasn't very good, to the point that it killed the show. Like, nobody watched it, and those who didn't like it. It's one of those weird things, because I'm pretty sure I was really excited for another season, waiting for it to come in the streaming service I was watching, and then just, like, never showed up. I don't even know if we even got it in Australia, but apparently with the 4th season, there's a character called Giles, who he just disappears. They replace him with another actor. He's a completely different character, this new guy, and they have a completely different dynamic, and it just doesn't work. And most of the reviews I've seen talking about the 4th season are like, they should have brought Giles back, because at the end of the 3rd season, he's like the only person who has like a proper character arc to some degree. Like, he just basically gets a promotion to like lieutenant or some shit, and then I guess he just didn't want to do another season, so they just wrote him out and said like, oh, he like moved to a different department. He's gone. He's left the country or some bullshit. And now Angie's back with this other guy. It's, you know how on X-Files they did that with like Robert Patrick, and a lot of people didn't like that because they liked Mulder a lot. Yeah, I think this is like that, but worse, because X-Files was still pretty decent in the last couple of seasons. Not fantastic, but decent. And not including the season like 9 or 10 or 10 or 11, whatever the hell they called it, whatever those seasons were. Like, that feels like one of those things as well where it's like, there feels like a dichotomy, because with Andrew Tribeca and Scrubs, the next seasons weren't exactly unwarranted, but at the same time, like, Scrubs was more narrative based, where Andrew Tribeca isn't. So Andrew Tribeca getting a 4th season kind of makes sense because it was doing really well, but then like they just floundered the whole goddamn season, and I don't really want to watch it for that reason, that like a lot of people don't like it. I don't feel like I'd like it either. And so I really felt like, because I love the first 3 seasons, and even with Scrubs, it has a great 8-season run. Like, the last episode in particular is fantastic. But then that has a sense of conclusion, finality. Andrew Tribeca doesn't need to have finality to it, because that's not really the point of the show. But at the same time, you could probably easily read the last episode of season 3 as the final episode and be okay with it. Like, I was okay with that being the last episode I watched, until I realized like 3 or 4 years later, oh shit, they made a 4th season? Like when I was sitting down watching Foxtel, oh, Scrubs is on. Who are these characters? What's happening here? And then me realizing it's season 9. The only person I knew a friend in high school, I was going to say the only person I knew who had seen season 9 was a friend in high school who, I talked to the next day about it. I was like, hey, I was watching Scrubs and they had like Dave Franco in it and whatever. And she was like, yeah, no, that was like season 9. I'm like, they had a 9th season? Like, obviously I still looked it up, but it's like the confusion, such a popular show. I don't think Andrew Tribeca was such a popular show, but such a great show. Having an extra season, always welcome, but just not worth it. It's like, you've got different elements now where you've basically got like decade after reboots, or just some kind of a forced continuation. Say you've got, again, X-Files of season, I believe it was 10 and 11, which were not unwanted, but were not also that great. So, there's that. They really should have just made movies after the first movie came out, because that movie's fucking great, and the rest of the show after it is like, it's fine, but it's like, come on. Chris Carter had such a good plan. Like, hey, let's just make like 3 or 4 movies after season 5 ends, and then, well, 2 or 3 movies, and then finish it off. But no, we need money. Why do you think Lost had like 9 seasons or some shit? Because they had a 3-season arc, and then they were forced to keep writing. So, I mean, there's a lot of appreciation for what you get in between. For some fans, see a lot of appreciation, but when mass consensus is like, what the fuck is the point of this? We've got like 7, 8 seasons, and we don't know what any of this is for. Something like, again, X-Files coming back, and even How I Met Your Father, which me and my brother watched like the first 2 or 3 episodes. Noteworthy, we laughed maybe twice. Which is not great, because it's like, we grew up with How I Met Your Mother. It's, a classic, despite me not really liking the second half of the show, because there's like a whole season where I'm pretty sure Marshall is just trying to hitchhike. And like, there's a whole season that's set around a wedding that's like cancelled out in like the next episode or something, they get a divorce, ha 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 ha. This whole 30 episode arc was pointless. Like, it's just, I don't like the second half of How I Met Your Mother. It's still a fun show. I still enjoy it, but there's a lot of that second half that I just do not care for. It's one of those sitcoms as well, but that's sitcoms extending themselves way too far. It happens with a lot of sitcoms. It happens with Friends. It happens with all of them. They've all got stinkers of episodes because suddenly they've started running out of creativity. That's why my biggest pet peeve is what is it? Damn, I had it in my mind. It's the episode where they just show off scenes from other episodes. I mean, Community at least did it better. But anyway, How I Met Your Father was like something that people really wanted after How I Met Your Mother ended. They wanted something else to jump onto. And again, you might know this as it is, they did make a pilot and it failed miserably. 7 years later, hey, here's How I Met Your Father, and it's got a pretty decent cast, It's got a different element to it as well, where, like, you got Kim Cattrall as the narrator, who, honestly, is the worst part of the show, outside of the writing. I did not care for her character. Like, I don't need her to just narrate random parts, or just to be there at the start of each episode. Like, I know it's different to how they did How I Met Your Father, or like, it's similar, but different, because in this case they're showing it as Kim Cattrall rather than it being like, oh hey, it's a person, it's Ted from the future narrating to his children. In this case it's the same thing, but we're just watching Kim Cattrall the whole time. I'm like, I don't need this, that's the weakest part of the show from those first 2 or 3 episodes. But yeah, the rest of it, again, cast-wise, fine, but just none of the characters seemed interesting. None of the story or what they were telling me or the jokes was interesting. It was, I think one of the best jokes was like, or at least one of the jokes that me and my brother laughed at was about a Tinder date she had, and he had just come back from another Tinder date, and I think that the simple joke was that he had a date, got lucky, and then moved on, and was maybe expecting the same thing of her. I don't know. I don't even know what the joke was. That he had just got on the Tinder date, he just ran to his next date. I don't know. Some shit like that. It's definitely a common thing with TV shows to have no sense of conclusion. It's an unfortunate element. But then you've got shows that have the complete opposite, where again, there are shows that only get 1 or 2 seasons and you clearly want more. Or they clearly deserve to have a hell of a lot more of a run. Like something like Twin Peaks, for example. Despite the second half of season 2 not being exactly what people liked, I still think it was fun. But I guess in the majority, I don't know, even the fans are like, give or take. It has some good episodes, it has a lot of bad ones. It has some good plot lines, it has some bad ones. It is what it is when it's a show that's been overly exhausted because they didn't know what the fuck they were doing for 30 episodes. So, that happens. But, like, it's just one of those things where you're just watching a show, you enjoy it, and it ends. And that's fine. Shows are allowed to just end. I just watched Mad Men, and it's a show that I could have done with 3 more seasons. But it ends, and it's great, and it's one of the best shows I've ever seen. I loved it. Same as Sopranos. Same as Twin Peaks to some degree. Like, we still got The Return, which was one of those really welcome 25 years later thing of, hey, we're doing a third season and it's completely fucking different and it's the most insane shit you'll probably ever see. To the point that I don't even know if I can recommend Twin Peaks to regular people, because there's also like, that's also one of those elements of when you get a show that gets updated so far along, unless the update is identical to the original, people might not be able to, connect to it. Like, X-Files had the benefit of, it was basically the same as what the show was, except I think they had, like, multiple, like, overarching story arcs with only, like, a few, like, because there was only, like, wasn't it like 13 episodes or something? It was like 10 to 13 episodes. Instead of like a 30 or 25 episode season or whatever, they had half as much, and they only had like 2 Monster of the Week episodes in like the first season, and it made me too interested in the main story. And of course, I had grown up with like the first 5 or 6 seasons of X-Files, but I hadn't seen like the latter half of the X-Files by the time the 9th or 10th season came out. So I'm like watching it like, what the fuck's going on? They had a kid? What? I don't know what's happening, And it comes down to one of those things where it's like, am I meant to be more interested in the... Because I had forgotten how the formula went, because again, I was a kid when I watched it. I was mostly scared of most of the episodes. But it's like, you watch it with more of a, say, adult context, more of a mindful context. Maybe you could be in your teens and still understand how the fucking show works. I was a kid when I watched it, then I was a teenager when the recreation boot thingy came out. Completely different mindsets. And so I didn't realize there was this, here's this main plot thing, but also on the occasion you get Monster of the Week episodes. And they were the best ones, and still remain the best episodes that the reboot had. Hey, look, Monster of the Week's back, because it fucking slaps. So, but then, again, you contrast that to the earlier 8 seasons, and you're like, I'm pretty sure it was 9 seasons, and then they did 10 and 11. So the earlier 9 seasons, it was still the same format. Still had your plot episodes, still had your Monster of the Week episodes. Easy peasy. Twin Peaks, on the other hand, is something that's like, The Return is something completely different to the original. It has a lot of the same cast, but in terms of how it tells its story, it's completely different. Because, like, the 90s show was, like, both a murder mystery and a progressive one where things continually added over the episodes. It wasn't just, Laura Palmer's dead by the end of episode 1. Hey, we've catched the killer, They don't do that. Not even for the whole first season. It's great. It's a building mystery, which was very rare for the TV at the time. But the TV show is also a satire of soap operas, both in the fact that they have a soap opera in the show that the characters watch, which is clearly very over the top, but the characters watch it, and you're like, oh, that's funny because it looks stupid as hell. But then, like The Bold and the Beautiful, or what's that British one? I don't know. There are too many of those soap operas, but you get the gist. And the show itself is also a satire. It's not just having a satire on the TV, it's also, or just having a soap opera on the TV in the show, it's also in itself a satire of that formula. So it's like showing you what the formula is and then showing itself as a joke on the formula. To be fair, you could just watch soap opera and be like, oh, Twin Peaks is a satire, I get it, it's pretty obvious, but some people might not get it, and you watch that compared to The Return, and The Return is completely different. That's not a satire on soap opera TV. There are elements that kind of are, very, very small elements, which is like a scene or two here and there, mostly with I'd say arguably 3 characters. Like Bobby has a scene that's very soap opera-ish, which is arguably the saddest scene in the show, or the most hilarious scene in the show. It's the one where he's just looking at a picture of Laura, and you can read it both ways. That it's the funniest shit you've seen, or it's the saddest shit you've ever seen. It is insane how well it's done. But then there's also the whole Ed and Norma whole relationship, and Ed's got his wife still, and Norma's moved on with this other guy, and that's where the soap opera still is, but that's because that's the heart of the show. It's still there, that that stuff that made you really love the characters and hope that they would, in their soap opera way, get together in the end. And they still are able to pull that off 25 years later, because it's just contained to a few characters. But there's also still one of those characters is overly comedic. The other character is kind of a dick. So you got like the antagonists to the couple that they love each other and whatever, but they've, the people that they're with are, again, one's an evil asshole and the other one has an eye patch and carries a golden shovel. She's the best. I even love her story in the second season where she just becomes a cheerleader again. It's hilarious. So, yeah. There are shows like that where they're continuations, whether it be decades later or whether it be the next year with a whole new cast and a whole new idea, or just simply removing a key part of the cast. You wouldn't think that Angie Tribeca removing just Giles would make the show fall apart, but you'd think, oh, remove Rashida Jones, remove Angie Tribeca, the show fails. It's like, well, not really. She doesn't really have a story arc in the show. That's like the point of the show, is that she doesn't, Police Story is the same thing. It's meant to be a jokey procedural thing every episode. The only character who actually has a fucking arc is like the one character who doesn't really have a lot of this main slapstick stuff happen to him. He's like the regular dude, I don't think the show is from his perspective, like, not that I remember, because again, I haven't seen it for quite a number of years, but it's like, if he's the main character who actually gets that, arc, then it's like, and that's only in the third season. It's not like it's set up in the first episode that he's like, I'm going to become like a lieutenant or something. It's like, no, it just happens, but it doesn't just randomly happen. It feels deserved. And it's even built up as deserved in the third season as well. So, spoilers, I guess. It's not that important, like, realistically, but it's like, it's important for the character, which is one of the few things that's important for any character. So yeah. Let me know if a show that you think, not that I would say went on for too long, but a show that had an extra season that just killed it. Like, did the season itself kill it? Did the season itself kill it for you? Like, say, Vikings, after they killed off one of the main characters, was the show still worth returning to? I know it still ended and then got a spin-off, but, like, was it still worth returning to? Because I didn't really return to it after one of the main characters died off, because I couldn't be bothered. Even my parents, who didn't want to watch that episode, still watched it and watched the whole entire show because I bought the Blu-rays for them. So, and I didn't want to watch on SBS, so that's why I bought the Blu-rays, because I'm like, I'm not watching this shit in fucking 480p, you kidding me? So, yeah. That's another one of those shows where it's like, it takes place over a long period of time, so obviously one of them, like a lot of the main characters, are going to just either die from old age, or they have to get killed off and replaced with, like, not exactly younger people, but just their kids, basically. So, it's an interesting show. I liked it, but, Anyway, that's all. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below if you have any, and I'll see you next time. Adios. Oh, I did realize I am wearing a Twin Peaks shirt, so thematically relevant, sure. Narratively relevant?